Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Knit a Spell.
Light from Lantern presents Knit a Spell. I'm Magical Maker Katie Rempe.
And I'm the Maker of Magic, James Devine.
Join us as we stitch together the symbiotic relationship between crafting
and the craft.
You know, everyone around the world is celebrating at this time of year kind of a similar holiday to All Souls Day or All Saints Day in the United States. What are we doing, Katie, on October 31st?
Halloween.
Trick or treat. Are you going for the tricks or the treats?
I always go for the treats, obviously.
Oh, yeah, me too. Although some people go for the tricks, right?
That's true.
We've had people try to steal our big plastic jack-o'-lantern.
Yes.
But he's plugged in inside, so it's been foiled several times by teenagers laughing and my husband being like, "Got you." He thinks it's pretty funny when they try to steal it. So
I'm up for busting kids too, so I'm into that.
especially if they run away laughing and
Yes, exactly. So, yes, Halloween, it's the, our version is like the soulless, spiritualist version of, the worldwide part that people take more seriously.
I mean, people are always looking at me when they're like, "Oh, you want to come to a Halloween party on October 31st? And I'm like, I'm pretty much universally always busy on October 31st.
Oh, yes. Because you have a visitor that comes around that time. Sam Hain, right?
Face palm.
Did I say something wrong?
It was just the pronunciation. Who is Samuel Hain?
I need to know.
So you probably have seen that word Samhain or Samhain, right?
Yes.
And you know how Celtic words are spelled and then pronounced in a totally different way than how they're spelled? Well, this is an example of a Celtic word that's pronounced Samhain. Oh, you wouldn't know that from how it's spelled, right? Worse than English. We go all out about English and how English is like, spelled different. Yeah. But like Gaelic, even worse.
Yes.
Right?
And the next level.
The next level of like, here we have this word that looks like Samhain, but is pronounced Samhain, of course. Right?
Obviously, yes.
Obviously.
It's one of those things you can always clock newbies on, right?
Totally. My hairstylist, so I was getting my haircut the other day, and he was like, "Oh, wishing you and the boys a great Samhain." And I was like, cringe. I was like, "Oh, well, thank you. You mean Samhain?" He's like, "Oh, sorry." We can't get too judgy.
That's right.
I mean, I could have been real like gatekeepy, like judgy, but I was like, "Oh, that was sweet."
I mean, you gotta be impressed to even knew what it was, right?
Right. I always thought it would be cute to have a T-shirt that says, "Who was Samuel Hain?" I always thought that was funny.
Oh my gosh. Well, maybe next year, guys, you can get it from Knit a Spell. Who is Sam Hain? ? Yes. Oh my God.
So in our tradition, we celebrate Samhain on the 31st of October as a way to imagine, like, this is halfway between and this is for us. So this is in neo-pagan tradition. This is modern witchcraft, which is, we're going to talk about some of the other traditions. But as we celebrate it now, this is halfway between the fall, the autumn equinox, and the winter solstice, right? So we're halfway in between. And so there are all these halfway marks. So the eight quarters, you could divide the year up into 8. And so you have the equinoxes and solstices kind of divide the year up into 4, right? And then halfway in between. And these are all holidays that right?
Yeah.
Halfway between the equinox, the autumn equinox, and the winter solstice is Halloween. We call it Samhain, right? Halfway between all of them, except for one most people don't really know. But there are references to these Groundhog's Day is one of them that people know, right?
Right.
This is Will There Be More Winter, right? That is also known as Candlemas, which is when the Catholic Church would bless all the candles, right? So this is Imbolc, which is the ew's first milk, right? And that's in the spring, the first starts of spring. So we have all these halfway between. May Day is another one, May 1st, halfway between summer and fall equinox, right? So that's right. So we have all of these halfway in between marks of these, holidays. And so this one is one of them, which is Halloween or Samhain, right? So we often will do some things that are gonna sound familiar. So our celebration is we gather and we some of the things that are common are divination, to really listen, because it's a time of year when it's thought that the veils are thin, if you will, or that the ability to communicate with the spirit world is easier. Traditionally, this is a time of the blood harvest. This is the third harvest. We've had the grain harvest, and then we had the fruit harvest, and now we have the blood harvest. And so in northern latitudes in Europe, this is winter's coming, and this is the time when you cull the herd, salt the meat, and get ready for a long winter. And this is the time when the herd, the animals that wouldn't make it through the winter, you would harvest and you would, slaughter. And so the blood harvest is this time, right? And so there's this sadness, but also this understanding of the, butchering the animals, right? And you would also think about your beloved dead and the people that are no longer here and that you've lost in the past year, especially the people you've lost in the past year. You'd light a candle for them, perhaps. You would hold a silent supper and eat food silently and put food on a plate in honor at an empty table setting for that person or those people. So you would set a table for your beloved dead, put tokens of food there for them, and eat in silence, because the idea is they can no longer feel the food, but they can experience the food through your experience. I am eating this food and savoring this food and enjoying this delicious food, and my enjoyment of this food I'm offering to my ancestors. It is such a moving and beautiful experience. It's so fantastic to do. So we do things like that, and that's called a dumb supper or a silent supper. So we do those things. It's really meaningful. We often light candles, and in a totally darkened room, we will often have something where we light a single flame and then pass the flame around and watch the room light up. Or have a single flame and meditate on it as a way to light the way for the beloved dead. So there's all kinds of things people can do, or that we have done in the past for this really sacred time. And, a lot of times we do that, and then we try to do it either before or after the kids come trick-or-treating, right? And so, or while the kids are trick-or-treating, or we set a basket out for candy, and then the basket's usually empty after, so we know we at least got one trick-or-treater.
Right, yes. One very industrious trick-or-treater, yep.
So that's what we do.
Wow, that's very interesting. When we first decided to do this episode, you had made the very great suggestion of saying, well, these are things that we do and obviously are, perhaps a little bit more well-known in like the magical world. But we should also explore other people's sort of similar celebrations around this time as well, all over the world. And what I was surprised by most, before we jump into some of the details, is that it just seems like no matter where you go in the world, there is this something similar that's being celebrated, something where it's just known that this veil is this way, except for here where we choose to ignore it. So there's that. But in places like Mexico, obviously, that'd probably be, the next maybe major holiday people might think of, Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. That's another big one. And, I actually didn't know a lot about this, or really any of them, until I saw that movie Coco, which I know is kind of just like an intro to this kind of culture.
Sweetest.
But it was really eye-opening for me, just to see how another culture approaches the concept of death and how it's not the end as long as they're remembered in a way, which just should ring so true with everyone, no matter what. I feel, it makes so much sense.
The movie Coco did it. I should just say that I grew up in the Sonoran Desert in Tucson, Arizona, and I've been exposed a little bit to Dia de los Muertos, and in culturally, although not as much as I could have been. And it wasn't the biggest holiday. We also celebrated All Souls Day on, All Saints Day is November 1st, and that was really big in the Catholic tradition of honoring the All Saints Day. And All Souls Day was sometimes celebrated November 2nd. In New Orleans, there's Fête Guédé, which is a similar celebration and honoring of the dead. That's the sort of Creole French / voodoo tradition. So that's something that's very similar. But Dia de los Muertos is another day that I think is after All Saints Day, and usually not during Halloween, but it's in that same season, right?
Yes.
And that for me was really a lot more focused as a Catholic tradition, and was and in Mexico, I think is a lot more centered around the church. I think in Coco, in order to make it more of a mainstream movie, took a lot of the Catholic traditions out of the movie. And a lot of the sort of, certainly there's, they romanticized it quite a bit. And there was some, license taken with some of the idea that what's remembered lives. And there is, I think, some of that inferred. That was never very overt to me as a kid. But I think it's a really sweet sort of message of the movie.
Yes.
Right. And it's a sweet sort of message, right? It was sometimes, I think, an obligation with the Los Muertos, right? And certainly there's a lot of really beautiful traditions with the flowers, and and you have to remember, this is also a blending of the native traditions and the colonialism of Catholicism, and of the Spanish colonialism of Mexico and Central and South America, right?
Yeah.
So some of the native traditions were stomped over, and some of these native traditions are really what brought some ancestor worship, and sort of were missing. And you see that in also the Creole and the Caribbean traditions, also the ancestor worship, had to be blended with some of the Catholic traditions, and was hard to get rid of from the native people. So you see some of that stuff coming through in the Afro-Caribbean, traditions, and in Dia de los Muertos. It depends where and how you see it, but that sort of shows up. But I think it's really a beautiful, beautiful traditions, and you do have a lot of colorful things. And in some cities, it's really, really popular, like in Mexico City, at big parades and just really colorful art, and it's fantastic. And the food is really important. So that's a really fun thing, to look at and to investigate.
Yeah, that is something I've noticed. No matter, again, sort of an overarching theme is like there is a lot of art in offerings. There is a lot of color, which is interesting since it's, quote, death or dead, I think a lot of people would think it's like all dark and, like funeral-esque, and then more, again, sort of our culture kind of a thing. But it's so much lighter than that.
Only here in this country is death black.
Yeah,
right?
Good point. Yeah.
And in other countries, death is so colorful. Right?
Yeah.
It's fascinating that we think that what we experience is the only thing.
I know, right? What you think is your reality, right?
But you had looked up some other interesting traditions.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's, like I said, a long list. But a couple of the other ones that I thought were interesting was in the Philippines, there's
Panganga Luluwa.
Panganga Luluwa.
Panganga Luluwa. Okay, yeah, we can do it.
There we go. I was so excited to say that, and then I knew by the time we got to it, I wouldn't be able to get my mouth around it again. So, oh well. Panganga Luluwa. There we go. So traditionally in the Philippines, this was something where the kids would go knocking door to door, asking in costumes and singing and asking for prayers for those stuck into purgatory. So again, you kind of seen that Catholicism sort of get in there a little bit to influence the waters of their belief system. In Hong Kong, there's the Hungry Ghost Festival. So sort of similar what you were saying you do in leaving a table setting that's, for your beloved dead, that you leave for them without anyone there. Sort of a similar concept here, except for this particular part of their festival takes place in August. So like August, September, still, interestingly enough, part of the harvest season, just a little bit sooner.
Yeah. And this is, that idea in Hong Kong of the hungry ghost, I think is a random sort of like, just in case there's a hungry ghost that's out there, because you leave food as an offering to your ancestors at your ancestor altar in Chinese tradition and in Japanese. I know the Japanese culture more than I know the Chinese culture, but in Japanese culture, you always have a family shrine. You always have an ancestor shrine in your house, and you always leave a bowl of rice for your ancestors. And that's important to do, that you always have your ancestors in their pictures, much like in the Mexican culture, you have the ofrenda at Dia de los Muertos, like you see in the movie Coco. Well, you have that in Japanese culture. You have the shrine to your ancestors, and you take that bowl of rice and you leave it there and you refresh it very often. And so this is to feed a hungry ghost in the Japanese culture is also it exists there as well, is if there's some random spirit that has not been honored, or that is, you leave that so that it doesn't bother you. It's almost like a poltergeist type of thing, is my understanding. And so this festival is to like serve those that have not been served or not remembered.
Oh, that's kind of nice. I mean, I know it could be seen as like keeping away some like bad presence, but it also could be just honoring someone who doesn't have someone to honor them anymore. And that's really
feeding the homeless.
Exactly. Yeah, really. So then the last one I wanted to try to get in real quick was from Nigeria, and this is the Odo Festival. So this one marks the return of dearly departed friends and family members back to the living. This celebration can last up to 6 months and has feasts, music, masks, very similar to what other traditions have. And in this particular one, it's celebrated once every 2 years, which is when they believe the spirits are able to return back to Earth. So again, another interesting timeline to build around.
Yeah, and that spirits again visit us and come back and are honored with, again, food and all these things, right?
Yep.
What an interesting, thing, the Aruru Odo Festival. When we come back from break, I want to talk about like some of the things these have in common, how we can honor the dead, and then how we can use crafting. I want to ask you about different ideas you have about those things, and especially around crafting. Like, are there things that people do to honor their beloved dead, and how crafting sort of plays into, Halloween, Samhain, honoring our ancestors, memorializing people in crafting. I mean, that's a cool conversation to have. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, Magical Makers. Guess what? You can now get Sun and Moon yarn kits from uuyarns.com. That's EWE yarns.com. My Sun and Moon shawl features 2 different weights of yarn. A smaller version can be made in fluffy fingering, and a larger version can be made out of woolly worsted. Both of these 100% merino yarns are superwash, and the color combinations are amazing. I even worked with Heather at UU Yarns to pre-coordinate several color combos that I think you guys will love. Learn more in our show notes or check out the kit at uuyarns.com. If you've ever been curious about getting a palm reading with my co-host James Devine, there's never been a better time than now. Not only does Jim offer empowering palm readings to help you tap into the hidden messages in your hands, he's also now offering Divine Hand Tarot readings for a limited time. Find out more about all of Jim's amazing offerings at thedivinehand.com and on his Instagram page, where you'll find him as Divine Hand Jim.
And we're back. What do all of these things have in common? Like I said, there seems to be a reoccurring theme of some sort of festival or tradition or ritual around this time. Some things I noticed that all of them seem to have in common are honoring and not fearing the dead, first of all, honoring it with more of a celebration instead of the mourning. And it's not to say that you can't mourn and celebrate at the same time. You laugh when you cry. I feel like it's a very similar emotion. So
I think that's something that I wish we would do more as a cultural norm here. We have this sort of like cultural thing of like, I mourn with my wearing all black with the veil and I cry and weeping. And we don't really have the wake. We don't really have the idea of dancing or of like celebration of life is like, so like, I don't know. We just have such a weird relationship with death in this country. Specifically,
our wakes are a snooze.
Yeah, that we can't like have music and dancing and food and like those kind of things of like, But I think it's also because we don't like some places hire women who are hire the wailing women to like get us all crying, like get us all to actually gnash our teeth and cry and wail. Like, let's get some emotion really going and like let it all out.
Yes,
right?
It's the time to do it.
People are just like buttoned up and like, and like, no, let's all just like blubber and whatever. And then like,
it is
do that over and over, rinse and repeat. Yeah. And be free.
Yes. And when you find that it happens again randomly, when you didn't expect it, just lean in. It's okay.
Yeah.
Again,
and then when you're
like
done,
you were saying, there is no done.
When you're done for that moment, you've burned a bunch of calories and look, there's carbs on the table and you can eat them.
Eat that chocolate and serve yourself some bread. Drink that, sacrificial little wine or whatever. Yes.
Yep. Yeah. Say what you will about the Mormons. There's one thing that the Mormons do when there's a funeral, and they make funeral potatoes, which is a casserole that is, when you look up a recipe, the casseroles with funeral potatoes are delicious.
And it's the know perfect, about this. I want one.
The perfect forbidden carb food of cheese, cornflakes are on top. You can't even believe how good they are. Yeah. I'm definitely a cornflakes on the top of the funeral potatoes thing.
That is an
maybe we'll get emails from people. If you have a recipe for funeral potatoes.
Yes, please.
And you are a cornflakes or no cornflakes person, I would love to know. You can email and tell us.
Yes, please.
Let's have a fight about it.
Yeah, right.
Because the fight's over recipes.
Sharing, whatever. Yeah.
All right.
You should probably make us both versions and send it to us so that we can taste test and let you know which one's the best. I mean, if you really want to do it like thoroughly, I guess. Yeah.
So there's other similarities that we see in these, right? So gifts, we often find offerings for the dead. And a lot of times it is my own effort that is put into those offerings, right? It isn't me going to the store and putting a Twinkie. I mean, you can, if it's something special, like Uncle John loved Twinkies, right? But usually it's something homemade, right?
Yes.
What else did you notice that are similarities?
There's a lot of colorful costumes. Again, sort of around the same time of year. Everyone seems to think this is the time when it's the thinner veil, it's easier to connect. And fire is a big theme. So lighting candles for them, doing bonfires, that sort of thing.
Right. I think a lot of times this is the light in the sky is waning, like the days are getting thinner. And this is a time when we are trying to light our way. Symbolically, the sun is dying or the year is dying. We are lighting our way through the winter. And so we are also lighting the way for the dead to find their way to the afterlife, right? And so these seem to go together. And I think that is whenever there's a funeral or whenever we do an end of life ceremony for someone, we often incorporate candles to light their way. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. Even if you don't realize that's why you're doing it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. So how would a magical person honor the dead with their skills? Let's say it's a person who doesn't maybe follow any specific tradition, but they still want to use their skills to do something. What kind of activities or rituals do you think they could get into?
Definitely, like I just said, lighting a candle. So anytime someone talks about, oh, my dog just died. We'll light a candle, right? And I'll inscribe the name of their dog on the candle, right? Or someone died. If someone has passed or is passing, invariably, I will light a candle to help them guide their way through their illness, through their process of dying, or if they've died, through the afterlife to find their way. That's huge and hugely meaningful to have that. I've often come to tears just doing that, right? Very simple candle, right? And divination, right? This is a great time to, as I had said before at the very beginning of this episode, right? This is the time to sit in divination and be able to connect with spirit, right? Because there's this idea that it's very quiet, right? What were some of the ideas you had? I think you had some ideas about this.
So again, I mean, I guess it kind of is a making process, but I thought it would be nice to do like, you make like a tea blend. And maybe that's helping you get through your grieving process, but also maybe it's a gift for the person that you're honoring. And then maybe they had a certain tea that they really liked.
I love that idea.
Yeah. Let's see.
With that, you could also put some calming herbs or things that are, special or therapeutic if you wanted, right?
Absolutely.
Some feverfew or something in there, some chamomile.
Yep. Lavender. Yep. I was just reading about, I'm going to say this wrong, mullein.
Oh, mullein. Yeah.
That's a good one to use too. And I also think, it's kind of similar, but taking this time to sort of build or revamp I called a mind palace. You kind of called it your temple.
Your inner temple. Yeah.
Exactly. Whatever that, imaginatory space is that you use in order to connect, whether it's with just your own personal self or things beyond. I think it's a really great time to do that because then it lets you connect to, your dead and ancestry and who knows what else that might be out there for you.
Right. I think one of the things to also consider is this. In my formal studies of death and dying, we know that psychologically, people do better when they recognize that our relationship with the dead doesn't end. When someone dies, our relationship doesn't end. It just transforms. And if we can allow ourselves to see the dead as entering a space of wholeness, healness, being whole, healed, and complete, and even in a state of enlightenment. So if my relationship with my mom was maybe not ideal, right? But as she has died, and now in her space of, my mom is not dead, so Mom, if you're listening, I'm just saying.
Sorry.
Sorry, Mom. But if you have a parent or someone who is, in life wasn't the most amazing relationship, in death, that person is whole and healed and complete and enlightened. So you can take the enlightened part of them or look at their difficulties and you can see that they are really right in this amazing place. They then are trying, and their whole thing of their relationship with you is to help you heal, right? From their difficulties and in spite of their difficulties, and help you move along that path. So you can start to do ancestor work with them. And you can do that by continuing the conversation with them, by having a photo and leaving a little candle or a little glass of water. Remember how water is a really common thing that we see all the time.
Right.
You can leave out a small cookie, or if it is, their favorite thing is a Twinkie, then leave one out, right?
Yes, exactly.
And you don't want to let it get stale or moldy. You want to leave a fresh one every so often. Right. If they loved whiskey, if they loved, if they were a smoker, you can leave out, something for them, right? You can let their best selves be present in your life, knowing that they're here to help you progress and heal from this place of enlightenment. They're now the mom, the grandmother, the uncle, the dad, the whoever the sibling, the spouse. They're their best version of themselves, and they're present to help you heal.
Yes. And I've often found that in those types of situations, once they have crossed, they they're aware of what happened and what they did, or what happened. And there's a lot of like, I think that's why they come back to help quite often, the ones that weren't always so helpful in life, because they are trying to make up for it because, life happens. We often don't exactly go the way we planned. And so, it's a live and learn moment, whether you're still here or not. So,
a lot of times they come back with apology. A lot of times they come back with remorse and with admission, and they say the things we were actually needing them to say in life. And it's up to us to really hear that. Yeah. I've noticed.
Yep. And
in my work as a medium, I've noticed that so far.
Yeah. And I think that's why honoring dead through like making also is a really great avenue.
Let's talk about that. So how can a maker and a crafter honor the dead, right?
Yeah. Well, if one of the best ways to do it is just thinking of them, then doing it around a project that you're making in their honor is a great way to do that. It's the meditative space that allows you to use your gifts to honor them. So like, for instance, maybe you would draw a picture for them if they loved a certain flower and you're very artistic in that way. You could use your skill that way to honor them. Or maybe you're a really great writer. You could write a little poem, or maybe you knit, crochet, weave, whatever, an altar cloth, something like that. It doesn't have to be a big thing. Maybe you're the one cooking their favorite special meal that they always would cook for you or something like that. There's a lot of ways once you sort of just unlock it a little that you don't have to like be, quote, a creative person or a maker necessarily to do it. You just have to have something you enjoy doing that then you can offer to them. And I think that's the most important part.
Yeah. And I think even if you're not a maker, wearing something of theirs, a jewelry, a brooch, like that's a very common way that we honor our beloved dead is, this was my mom's ring, my mom's brooch, this was my dad's hat, my dad's shirt, these kind of things. But I think also I've seen people take like, these are, the t-shirts my dad wore and we made it into a quilt. Yes. Or I think of like the AIDS memorial quilt. This is a really special way that we've honored people who've died of AIDS. And through that process, early on in the 80s, when people didn't understand, there was still a lot of homophobia. There was still a lot of like intolerance and misunderstanding. And there were families that through the process of creating that quilt, got to understand and relieve themselves of homophobia and understand their kid or their beloved relative that died of AIDS. And that was a healing process. And they were able to let go of their homophobia and start to realize, the loss and grieve through that process. So there's tons of stories of actually the making being a pathway to healing, and to embrace the relationship, right? So I think that's something to consider, is that itself can be a ritual of like, absolutely. I'm reclaiming this relationship now that this person is gone, and owning my part in, I might have a part to play in, how I can own in this healing, right?
Yeah, taking that time to think about it and be in it, and not avoiding it. Yeah. That's how growth happens.
Yeah. It's a pretty deep episode, pretty deep topics we have here.
I know. And I thought
October's the time for
exactly.
this stuff.
That's right. It's the beginning of our ends, which are only avenues to new beginnings, as we found out last week. I know. So.
Well, I'm excited to know what might come up when we draw
the
magic card.
This week, since we were talking about this topic, maybe it should be that the question we ask for the upcoming week ahead is, how can we best honor our beloved dead in the week ahead? So,
and the question even rhymes.
I do my best.
I love that sound. There's a little ASMR happening.
Oh, yeah. My mom is the queen of doing that, like, foldy, flippy.
Oh, the ruffle.
Yes.
The ruffle shuffle.
The ruffle shuffle. Or
the riffle. or whatever it is.
Yeah, that thing, the bridge thing that you do, and sometimes it flies everywhere. That's what I like to do.
Totally. You need to do ASMR shuffling. It's amazing.
Shuffle. This is your tarot card reading for the week.
All right, ready?
I'm ready.
Card. Oh, interesting. So, the card of the week is it's funny enough a little bobbin, but this bobbin has like bric-a-brac ribbon around it. Da-da-da-da. And it's gold, and it's got a little sewing guy on the top of it to let you know that this is probably going to get sewn on a garment as a trim. So this is a trim. It's a notion. It's a ribbon. It's wiggling back and forth, kind of making me see, nothing's straightforward when it comes to this kind of topic. So for me, how can we best honor our beloved dead in the week ahead with this as our message? I think, how have we overlooked some of our trims, our finishings? How can we put little touches onto things to make them more special? What were the little bits that you remember from this person that really bring memories home and stories to your mind? I think concentrating on those types of things this week is going to be a really good idea. The little small details. What do you think, Jim?
Yeah, I love that. And I think to add to that, I see this as one of those cardboard spools with that bric-a-brac, on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's also potentiality available, right? Like you could make anything out of this.
There you go.
This is sitting there on the shelf, and you grab it off the shelf and you think, what could I make with this? What could this be? And so like anything that's sitting there, that you could use this for anything. And so with what Katie said, I think there's also this idea of potentiality, and like in any ending, in anything that we do with death, there's also this potential of like, what could we do with life? And look at the little skull at the top and the little moon at the bottom, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with the star over it and everything. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of growth for potential here. There's even flowers all around it, which I'm just seeing now. So, yeah. New beginnings, even in your ending. So if you've been thinking maybe, I've always thought about starting an altar. I've always thought about starting this. Or, I love the idea of making a mind palace. Maybe now is the time to grab that thing off the shelf that you've been putting off and do it. So there you go. Our words of wisdom this week.
I am so excited to be doing this podcast with you, Katie. And I am especially excited about our kit, our beginning knit kit.
First Mitts kit. Yes, still available at Maker's Mercantile if anybody is looking for an amazing way to get ahead in your beginning knitting.
Every time I see that post on Instagram, that whole kit is just so cool, and I'm just like, wow, that is really, and I'm like, oh wait, that's ours.
I know, right? Yes, especially when it comes to like all the bags and stuff. I feel like such an amazing maker. I have my own. I know. We have our own project bag, Jim.
It's very, very cool. I just really appreciate you. And at Light from Lantern, follow at Light from Lantern. Go to lightfromlantern.com. Subscribe to Katie's newsletter. Like, you've heard it a few times if you've been listening, but really do it because your newsletter is so great.
Well, ditto. Absolutely. You should sign up for Jim's as well, which you can find at thedivinehand.com. And also he is on Instagram, Divine Hand Jim. He does his weekly Meet a Mystic show every Tuesday, which I highly recommend if you are there. If you miss it, you can always get the replay on his Instagram too. So you have no excuse.
Thanks for listening.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And if you guys have any ways that you like to honor your dead or ancestors or anything with your magic or making, again, you can always email us at knittaspellpodcast@gmail.com or drop us a DM at knittaspell on Instagram. Hooray.
Yay.
All right. Until next week, Jim. Thanks for everything.
Bye, all.
Bye-bye.
This episode is a wrap. If you enjoyed what you heard, go ahead and follow us on your favorite podcast streaming app. And don't forget, you can see full video episodes of Knit a Spell on Light from Lantern's YouTube channel.